I rise today in support of Ranking Member Takano's bill, H.R. 366, the Korean American VALOR Act. This bill would allow Korean veterans who served during the Vietnam War and later became American citizens to be eligible for VA health care. VA has been providing health care services to Allied veterans through government agencies since World War I. These Korean American veterans deserve the same opportunity. Korean American veterans share similar needs with the veterans they served alongside with in Vietnam. They suffer from PTSD and Agent Orange exposure, among other injuries and illnesses. These veterans have earned access to proper care through the VA. Ranking Member Takano's bill will do exactly that. Mr. Speaker, as you know, many of the 70th anniversary of the vitally important alliance between the U.S. and the Republic of Korea. As such, this bill is fitting tribute to thank the Korean American veterans for their service. Now, I urge all of my colleagues to support H.R. 366. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Illinois reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of my bill, H.R. 366, the Korean American VALOR Act. I'm proud to have sponsored this legislation, which will provide eligibility for VA health care to veterans who served in the armed forces of the Republic of Korea as allies of the United States during the Vietnam War, who have since become naturalized American citizens. This year marks the 70th anniversary of the Korean American Alliance. Last month, during his visit to Washington, D.C., President Yoon Suk-yeol addressed a joint session of Congress and reflected on how our alliance has served to safeguard freedom and democracy throughout the world. Following the Korean War, the United States and the Republic of Korea signed a mutual defense treaty on October 1, 1953. It has been called the alliance forged in blood, in part out of gratitude for the service and sacrifices made by Americans during the Korean War. The Republic of Korea has aided the United States in every war since the Vietnam War. Between 1965 and 1973, South Korea sent more than 320,000 troops to fight alongside U.S. service members in Vietnam, the largest contingent of any U.S. ally. More than 5,000 South Korean troops died in the Vietnam War, and at least 11,000 were injured. An estimated 2,800 veterans who served in the armed forces of the Republic of Korea during the Vietnam War and later became U.S. citizens are living today. My legislation would provide some measure of long overdue parity for Korean American Vietnam War veterans who up to this point have never been eligible for VA health care services. Under this bill, the United States and the Republic of Korea will establish a reciprocal agreement. Korea will reimburse the United States for health care services VA furnishes to these Korean American veterans. In exchange, the United States will reimburse Korea for health care it provides to veterans of the United States Armed Forces residing in Korea. Now, such an arrangement is not new. Since 1958, through its Allied Beneficiary Program, VA has had the authority to treat veterans who have served in the armed forces of nations that were allied with the United States during World War I and World War II. These veterans did not need to be United States citizens, and VA has the authority to treat veterans of any combat era. Now, VA furnishes this care through reciprocal agreements, which have been established with the United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and South Africa. And in 1976, VA's Allied Beneficiary Program was extended to certain veterans who had served in the armed forces of Czechoslovakia or Poland during World War I or World War II, who subsequently became U.S. citizens. We recently observed the 50th anniversary of the date the last combat troops left Vietnam. It is far past time for our nation to properly honor the service and sacrifice of South Koreans who served side by side with United States troops during the Vietnam War and have since become naturalized U.S. citizens. We must ensure they finally receive the same respect and consideration their counterparts from other allied nations have received for generations. The needs of Korean American veterans of the Vietnam War are no different from those of U.S.-born veterans. From Agent Orange exposure to coping with complex injuries and mental illnesses, these veterans deserved the specialized care and services that only VA can provide. And many of them are entering their final years and should not have to wait any longer for this care. So I urge my colleagues, Mr. Speaker, to support H.R. 366, the Korean American VALOR Act. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from California reserves. The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I now recognize the gentlewoman from California for 2 minutes, Young Kim.
The woman is recognized from California.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Chairman Bose, for yielding. And I rise in strong support of H.R. 366, the Korean American VALOR Act. And I want to thank Ranking Member Takano for your leadership on this very important issue. During his joint address to Congress, South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol highlighted that during the Korean War, Korean and American soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder and fought bravely. But the Korean War was not the last time Korean soldiers fought alongside American troops. They fought side by side in the Vietnam War, sharing the same physical and mental scars from this conflict. And many of these Korean troops eventually immigrated to the United States and became proud, naturalized American citizens. And I personally know several of these individuals, and I'm eternally grateful for their service. Unfortunately, because the United States does not currently have a reciprocal veterans healthcare agreement with the Republic of Korea, these Korean Americans cannot access veterans healthcare benefits. The Korean American VALOR Act will create a pathway for an agreement to be reached and for these veterans to receive access to VA healthcare. So I urge my colleagues to support this legislation, and I yield the balance of my time.
Gentleman from
Reserve.
Okay. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the gentlelady from my own home state of California. I look forward, I'm very confident this bill will become law, but we will need to make sure that we work together in a bipartisan way to make sure this agreement finally, the reciprocal agreement finally gets put into effect. At this time, I'd like to yield 3 minutes to my good friend who holds a seat on the House Budget Committee, Homeland Security, and the House Judiciary Committee. She's indeed a staunch advocate for all our military service members and veterans. I would like to now yield to the gentlewoman from Texas, Congresswoman Jackson Lee, 3 minutes.
The gentlewoman from Texas is recognized.
I thank the gentleman as well, Mr. Takano, for his vision and leadership and the years of service that he's given to the Veterans Committee. We could not have a more stalwart champion for the veterans of America. I thank my friends on the other side of the aisle and certainly your colleague from California. You've made a very important point for this to work. It has to be bipartisan. I hope that I will lean into the efforts and the bipartisan efforts that need to be done to ensure its not only passage, but its implementation. As the ranking member indicated, I'm on Homeland Security, the Budget Committee, many times. In those committees, we see the concerns of domestic security. We also see the concerns of being effectively utilizing all tools to ensure the proper budget for the people of the United States of America. I cannot think, as we approach Memorial Day and as we commemorate the acknowledgement of Asian Americans in this great month of May, interacting with all of our community, that we would not find an appropriate time to honor those Korean American soldiers who fought alongside of our fellow Vietnam soldiers in a battle that was for democracy and protecting, if you will, the sense of equality, protecting the people of that era and of that war. These soldiers bled, they rescued. They stood in front of our soldiers in terms of being comrades and fighting alongside. They saved lives, they lost lives. And I think that it is important to take note of those who served, who were members of the Armed Forces of the Republic of Korea, and as a veteran of the Armed Forces of the United States, for purposes of the provision of health care by the Department of Veterans Affairs. For so long, I would listen to my Vietnam vets before we really answered their call on Agent Orange and saw them get very sick, saw many of them pass away. Talking about Agent Orange over and over again, and it just seemed that it was not being heard. Thank goodness we have done so many different things, the PAC Act, Agent Orange, all of my tenure as a member of the United States Congress. We finally understood the truth of what veterans say, and every time they speak, we should listen. I was with veterans over the weekend, and you want to thank them everywhere you go. Every speech I make in my community, I ask veterans to rise and say thank you. In this instance, Title 38 is a special pay authority used to recruit and retain employees in certain healthcare occupations. It allows NIH to be competitive with other healthcare facilities. But this would expand the eligibility of these benefits, this Korean American VALOR Act, to veterans who served in the armed forces of the Republic of Korea during the Vietnam War and have since become naturalized citizens. Almost 3,000. And how many others served? 300,000. And so this legislation is clearly evidence of our relationship between the Republic of Korea.
Time.
Additional 30 seconds.
The gentleman, she is recognized.
The Republic of Korea and the friendship that we've established. As we heard the president who spoke to a joint session just a few weeks ago, he talked about patriotism, democracy, and the unity of our nations. It is absolutely imperative that we support these Korean War vets who stood alongside of us, and to be able to acknowledge them that they served in Vietnam. They are now naturalized citizens, and they have, in fact, have the evidence of the illness. It is so important to call them Korean American Vietnam veterans, naturalized citizens. We want them to get the honor of the Korean American VALOR Act. I ask my colleagues to support it, and I yield back.
California reserves. From Illinois is recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. We do need to remember that this is a perfect weekend, a perfect week to do this when Memorial Day is coming up, and we were honored to make sure that these veterans are recognized in the way they should be, and that they do receive the health care. With that, I reserve.
Gentleman from Illinois reserves. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further speakers. I'm prepared to close, and I reserve.
Gentleman reserves.
I have no more speakers, and I'm ready to close as well. I reserve.
Gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, I ask all my colleagues to join me in passing H.R. 366, the Korean American VALOR Act. And might I just add to the chairman's assertion that this is the perfect week to pass this bill. I've already mentioned the 70th anniversary of our historic alliance. But now, as we in the Indo-Pacific must strengthen our alliance, I also want to add my congratulations to both the nations of Japan and the Republic of Korea for making great strides to improve their relationships and to afford us the opportunity in the trilateral alliance among the United States, Japan, and Korea, South Korea, to become stronger allies. And this legislation, I believe, is part of the entire effort to become stronger allies and what is greatly needed, a greater cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I encourage all of our members to support this legislation. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.